Hi, thank you everyone for joining today. We're just going to give it another minute or so before we get started, just in case anybody is dialing in currently. My name is Robert Booth, and I'll give a brief introduction myself once we get started, and yeah, we'll get going from there.
Hey, tell Megan I made it.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you everybody again for joining today. My name is Robert Booth. I'm the Director of the Process Discovery here at Accelerate. And then today I'm here to serve as a moderator of sorts, really asking questions for UiPath, Chet Chambers, and then Accelerate's very own Harsh Thakur. So thank you guys both for joining today, for this session. Would you guys be able to provide just a brief introduction on yourselves? Chet, if we could start with you and then move on to Harsh before we begin.
Sure, I know all about me. My name is Chet Chambers. I'm a decade-long RPA practitioner, and I have the honor of being a VP and Chief of RPA Evangelist for the Americas here for UiPath. Last company I scaled, we built 224 automations in a little over a year. It was 300,000 hours worth of hours automated out of the business, about 20 million in hard value. And Robert, that's back when it was hard. So excited to be here today. Excited to talk to you about all of the changes that have occurred in RPA and the UiPath platform.
Great. Thank you. Looking forward to it. Okay, Harsh, and yourself, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Harsh Thakur. I am a partner and chief automation architect at Accelerate. My primary role is to advise clients on how to build and scale their RPA programs. And I'm really excited to be on this panel. Look forward to having a great conversation with you and Chet on this very interesting topic.
Great. Thank you guys both for the introductions. Now, we actually had a previous webinar, Chet, that you did with our Chief Automation Officer, Amit Zaidi, where you guys discussed setting up an AREP program, or AREP, you'll hear me refer to it, program. But today's session, as it says here, is all about building out or scaling up your AREP or AREP initiative. So before we do that, before we kind of get into that discussion, which is I definitely have a lot of good questions for both Chet and Harsh, I want to provide a brief recap just for everybody watching on what we mean by this, a robot for every person, or AREP, and how it helps your organization. So just to provide a quick recap, when you're thinking about AREP, what you really have to do is enable your users. Now we're gonna get into that in a minute, but when your users are the ones that are going to be creating these bots, that are going to be doing these tasks, that is going to be saving or providing value to the organization. So when we look at that, we need to think about, well, as an organization, how are we going to get this compounding organizational value that you are going to be getting from enabling your users? And the reasoning why that's so important is if you enable your users, you're able to build at scale. That's how you're going to get this organizational value. And that's, over the long term, how you transform your organization. So what AREP really is, and I want to, Chet, just kind of get your interpretation of it as well from a high level, is AREP is meant to transform your organization if done correctly by enabling your users to build at scale. That's how you're going to get that value. So before we get into the slide and what we kind of mean about that, how we enable users and how we're going to be able to build this up, Chet, if you want to give just a brief high level on what you think a robot for every person is, to you.
Yeah, so AREP is just that. It is a robot for every person across the organization. The days of a few RPA people coming in and changing or automating the company, those are behind us. That was the old way of doing it. That's the way that I did it The way that you do it today is much faster and much broader in its reach. It's about an organization getting behind an RPA platform. And we're going to talk about the how here in a minute, but we need to enable those power users. So calling all power users, we want you to go out there, take the training, and start to build automations for yourself and for others in your department. Now, your regular user, the non-technical user, we want them using Studio X, and we want them to build automations for themselves. Now, understand, this is in addition to, this is and do your big back-end unattended RPA. This is not instead of, but the whole idea behind a robot for every person is that if I can save you 20 minutes or 40 minutes or an hour a day, where can you apply that time back to your organization? I like to think about UiPath as building a time machine. It doesn't move you forward or backward in time, but it generates usable time across the entire organization.
Great. No, that's a much better way probably of putting it than I did. So thanks for that, Chet. Oops, sorry. Make sure my screen is up. Maybe having some technical difficulties. I apologize. Harsh, are you guys able to see my screen currently?
We're able to see your screen, but it's completely blank, like your desktop though.
Oh, I see. Okay. I apologize to everybody on the call as well, to Chet and Harsh. I'm not sure what happened. It just seemed to go blue. So it seems that this can definitely happen sometimes. Unfortunately, it had to happen now. I'm going to try and fix this. Harsh, would you be able to make presenter and that presentation just while I get this set up?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And I apologize about that, gentlemen. So I could still lead the conversation. I just need to have someone else have the screen up.
Sure.
Hey, buddy, I've done them with no slides many a time. The blue screens tackle me more than once as well.
Yes, it couldn't happen at a worse time. But Chet, I appreciate what your interpretation of it, right? Because it's hard to find one standard definition of it. But I think what you're saying, it really resonates and what people can get out of it. So if we can move on to the next slide, we're really going to go into what we mean by enabling users. Okay, yeah, so there we go. I see the screen coming up. Perfect. So enabling your users, we're going to really break it down into three main categories. So you have your users that consume, right? We classify these as our automation users. So these employees can suggest ideas and use automations that are being provided to them to be able to get more of that organizational value. But you also have your users that create. And these are the individuals that really could be broken up into a couple of different tranches. But your RPA developers that you are most commonly hearing or referring to, these are the ones that are going to be creating automations that are distributed throughout the company. But we really like to think of these as enterprise bots. So these are people that are specifically designated for an RPA role. However, what we want to talk about are our power users and our citizen developers. So these are tech-savvy employees, but they're able to develop automations either for themselves, which we call an assistant bot, or for themselves and others in their department. If the task is shared, we call these our attended bots. And then you finally have users that control. And this is going to be your COE. Harsh, if you'll be able to click through on the animation. There you go. These is going to be where you're really governing all of these automations, right? So what you may think of now is your RPA developers only, but in reality, when you're talking about AREP, it's enabling other users within the business. And if you're able to classify what those users are really going to be focusing on, that can help provide a foundation in which you can build this. Now, when you think of attended or assistant bots, usually UiPath Studio X are going to be the platforms where the power users and the citizen developers are going to be able to really create these automations. Whereas an RPA developer would use the more enterprise UiPath Studio. So it's not a hard and fast rule by any means, but that's just something that we've noticed, and that's how we like to to classify it as. Now, Harsh, one question I would like to ask for you, and I think it's a little beneficial if you can expand a little bit more on the enterprise bot, the attended and the assistant bot, and how these really correlate to users. That would be very helpful.
Certainly, RJ. And just as what Chet said, gone are the days when you would bring a RPA team in and they would build. They would take 8 to 12 weeks to build this huge automation that would touch different users of different roles and do a huge chunk of a single transaction. Right now, certainly these things are being done today. But in addition to that, in the past year or so, we've seen advancement in technology, and we've seen UiPath launch tools like Studio X, which empower non-programmers to actually jump into and build automations themselves, right? So on one end, you have what we call as the enterprise bots, which are large, spanning across the enterprise, touching different roles, different departments, and take some time to build. And granted, these enterprise bots have a lot of ROI, and they get prioritized, and companies love to invest in RPA and these bots. But in the past year, with the advent of Studio X, what has been happening is smaller tasks or smaller bunch of tasks that you now don't have to wait for your RPA COE to build them. You can download Studio X and you can replicate your steps in a nice recorder, and the learning curve and the time to market is extremely low. So because the time to market or time to value is so low, the return on investment is much higher, right? So apart from that category of enterprise bots, you now have what we call as the attended bot within Studio X. And then we have a new emerging concept of a virtual assistant, which I think is really exciting, and we'll see what UiPath does with it. But in conjunction, you now have a way for regular employees to learn UiPath Studio quickly and save, as Chet said, 20 minutes in a day or 1 hour in a day, and reinvest that time in something far more fruitful.
No, that makes complete. And it sounds like if you enable your users and have these categories, I think another potential benefit, right? And I would just want to hear your thoughts on it quickly before we get to this next slide, is that your pipeline scope can also increase the more users that you have that are able to deliver on it, right? If you only have RPA developers, then your pipeline will be limited to whatever they can develop in their timeframes. But if you enable more users that are able to identify more tasks and automate them themselves, it seems like your scope of your pipeline increases as well, which is part of this AREP initiative. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at Gartner's hyper automation, for example, right, the only way to achieve hyper in hyper automation is to build at scale. And the only way to build at scale is to empower people outside your regular development community to build and automate their daily tasks.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. So thank you for that, Harsh. And you already started the next slide. That helps provide a lot of context. Now we've discussed, who are the types of users, right, and what they really create in many cases. But I think it's also important to talk briefly about what we really call the automation mindset. And I think that the automation mindset really coincides with how you can enable not just your users to create automations, but to find opportunities. But you have to make sure it's simple. And Chet, I have a question after I get through this, because you had a couple of weeks ago when we discussed, you have a pretty simple criteria on how really you should look at automation. So I got a question for you in a moment. But
Sure.
When we look at the automation mindset, we're kind of classifying, the first thing you should ask, do you enjoy doing this task, right? And I know that seems simplistic, but the point is, if you enjoy doing it, then of course, keep enjoying it. It doesn't mean that there's not potential for opportunity, but other than that, that's okay if you enjoy it. But if you don't enjoy doing a certain task, you want to ask yourself, is this something that many people must do? And if it is something that many people must do, can the steps or the logic in reality be outlined? If they can, you can create an attended bot for that. Now, if it's something where the steps and logic cannot be outlined, but you think it's a good opportunity, that's something where you can give it to an RPA COE, and this is where an RPA developer can work on creating maybe a more enterprise bot where they can combine components. But you'll see when you take it with this simple criteria, even if it's a task many people don't do, you can still create your own virtual assistant for yourself. And you're still saving yourself time. You're saving yourself value, and it's all being stemmed from a very simple question. Do you enjoy doing this task or not? So if you'd be able to click through here, before I just get to Chet on one question on this, is it's clear and repetitive tasks are you'll hear that mantra a lot. But really, when you think of clear, can it be outlined or not? And maybe it's too difficult to be outlined by one certain user, but they feel there's a good opportunity there that maybe just requires a little bit of extra thinking. That's where a RPA COE can come in. But you're really looking at our bots for either for personal, like an assistant bot, or team use, your attended bots, because that's how you're going to get that enterprise-wide benefit. So, Chet, before you gave a pretty simple, but it was a really powerful criteria on how you look at what can or should be automated. Would you mind sharing your thoughts on what we call the automation mindset and how that really correlates with AREP and how you feel it kind of empowers an organization?
Man, I never remember what I say, so I've got one in my mind right now. If that's not the one you want, point me in the right direction. But if you're following NASDAQ, if you're following the stock market, follow the money. But if you're following RPA, follow the labor. Where is Martha's bottlenecks, and who knows more about where Martha's bottlenecks are than Martha? Who can tell you more about what your systems are going to do than process mining? We've got to put the people and the tools in place to show us where it hurts. And that's what this is all about. Imagine your RPA team as being a bunch of doctors. If you tell them where it hurts, they'll tell you how to fix it. And I'm not sure if that was the one that you were looking for, but the idea here is if you hate it, automate it. I mean, that's a little tagline we came out with a while back, but understand everyone in the organization should be an automation user. I mean, I've got robots now that start my day. They log me into the 5 systems and take me to the menu. So where do you start? You start where your labor is.
Yeah, no, that was definitely it. If you hate it, automate it. That was kind of what stemmed all of it. Or how I'm looking at it, because it's instead of trying to find the perfect use case, you really should just look at what is it that you don't like to do, start there. And I think that was really, really powerful.
Yeah,
so
the
thank
thing
you
about
for that.
perfect will get in the way of good enough to get the ROI. We got to be careful of that analysis by paralysis. That's real. So It doesn't always have to be the perfect one, but it has to be one that gives value back to the individuals.
Exactly. Yep. No, great way to put it. Okay, Harsh, would you be able to just go to that next slide? So one of the ways we enable our users and when we're doing these at clients is we hold a series of Botathons. Now, these Botathons are a 2-day event, and you can have multiple iterations of them, but what you're doing is you're tag teaming with a client RPA COE, and we have what our program is, which is called Studio X, which Harsh, I'm going to have you explain in a moment if that's okay, where we're teaming with the RPA, and what we're doing is empowering a lot of users at one time through a various Botathon portal with training content, given an assignment that is able to be scored, and also useful templates. So what this is going to do is put these into teams that will be able to develop these automations. So Harsh, can you expand a little bit more on the structure of this? Obviously, it's something that's been thought out, right? Why is it the structure works like this? What is some of the things you've seen how these Botathons help enable users?
Sure. And this is something that not only has been thought out, but has been executed multiple times in the past few months, where we've seen regular folks like Martha who look at Studio X and then say, oh, this looks intimidating, but they go through the Botathon and come out confident and excited to use this new technology, right? So one of the early things we realized as we built a ton of RPA talent here at Accelerate is that this is a highly experiential skill, right? And what do I mean by experiential is you have to do it to learn and get proficient with it. A classroom session is not going to really cut it, right? So we came up with this. We borrowed the concept from hackathons, and we came up with this idea that if we can do these Botathons, number one, we will give hands-on experience to the participants. We will involve the COE so that from a governance standpoint, the right rules are being enforced. And more importantly, at the end of the Botathon, the participant now has a usable bot that that person gets to use from that point forward. So if I go to the next slide, I can probably walk you guys more through what a typical Botathon looks like, right? So we do indeed do some classroom and some prep. There's tons of Studio X information on UiPath Academy. We leverage that and make sure that all the basics are clear, right? Then we do some collab sessions with the participants and help them look for the right opportunities that can be automated, and then pick one of those as the topic for that team's Botathon. And as you can see, day one and day two, so the Botathons are a couple of days. It does take a couple of days to build a serious bot, right? And we have a team of Accelerate coaches and representatives from the COE to help them, and that provides a safety net. But a lot of development actually is done by the participants in a very hands-on way. So in the end, what you get is a production-ready bot that you can use. But more importantly, what we've seen from some of the Botathons that we have done in the past is that the participant comes out more confident because he or she has used that technology and sees the bot in action.
Thanks, Harsh. I appreciate that. So you kind of, I know it's a little bit of a weird because of the hand over here, but you really helped with walking us through what that Botathon looks like. So Chet, actually, before we get onto this, I do have a question. You know, it's going to be related to this slide, but as well what we just went through. You know, Chet, now you have kind of you've seen our opinion on how we try to enable users via our Botathons. Would just like to kind of hear your thoughts on that, and maybe some other activities that you've seen at certain clients or initiatives that had good success setting up an AREP initiative. Any activities that you may have seen?
Oh yeah. So Botathons, I love them because, Harsh, you're exactly right. You put it in their hands and the fear goes away. You know, there's a lot of trepidation right at the beginning, but then they go, oh, well, that's not any harder than a macro. And, you know, it starts to drive them through the Studio X or the Studio platform. They go, oh, well, now I got a handle. Oh, man, I can really get to going. And what you do is you've now given them confidence. One of the other great things that I see to do is on the idea front, or where to automate, making sure that it's departmentalized. It's company-wide, but you compete departmentally. Why is it that finance has got 34 ideas in this week? Where are you at, shared services? And you start to play the departments against each other, but all of them fully behind the platform. The idea here is that you need to put a robot on every desktop. You shouldn't leave this department out or leave that department out. Understand they need to be competing, friendly competition, but do it in a way that you gain ideas from across the entire organization, because we are smarter together. And a lot of times we forget about that when we try to stand back and dictate what we're going to automate, and that we know best mentality. You have got to lay that down and welcome the crowdsource idea around, where is my roadblock? And if it's a roadblock for me, who else in the organization is it a roadblock for? And then as you have made that call out, calling all power users, they get drafted in. Now, 1 in 5, we need volunteers to start using Studio X. And Harsh, your Botathon way is a great way to get that confidence instilled in them. But you want to make this thing explode, you have got to get top-down goals put in senior manager or senior leadership's goals. and have them make the call out to their people to get behind this program, get involved, be a part, understand we've got to save our company coming out of this, global crisis that we've been in.
Thank you, Chet. No, we are smarter together. I like that. So we're on this slide before we kind of get to the questions, and I apologize. I should have brought this up prior. So if anybody has any questions that doesn't already know, you can use the tray to ask any questions you would like. We're going to try and get to them. So I want to get through this last slide. So we discussed a lot. We discussed what Botathons are, how they enable your users, what are some other common ways to kind of to help get your AREP initiative going. But when you're really trying to break it down, but still at a macro level, to scale, you need to have big impact and be focused, where you identify high value transformational opportunities to quickly showcase that value and the power of attended automation. And then next, you're going to just be able to click through that slide, Harsh, for me. If you do that, you want to make sure you expand quickly. And these are the purpose of these Botathons, where you're able to get to the work and get it done quickly, where you're putting these robots and digital assistants in the hands of your employees across the enterprise. And you're trying to leverage automation by doing these common tasks and activities, because this is going to empower productivity. Automation beyond the common, empowering employees to create their own automations or solve unique challenges and explore new levels of productivity. That's all a byproduct and part of what AREP is, or that robot for every person initiative. So before I hand it over to the audience, there's an open question really for both of you, but is there any other clear hallmarks that you guys have seen of organizations that have established or really scaled an AREP program that you guys would like to discuss, whether it be Chet or Harsh?
Go ahead, Chet.
Well, I can give you one. So those that have really adopted this they compete internally. It's a trophy, it's a T-shirt, it's a mug, it's something you can't get anywhere else. You have got to make it the driving factor inside your organization to be the department with the biggest savings in time, dollars, accuracy, whatever it is you decide. And the other big thing that I want to emphasize here is doing AREP, a robot for every person, is an and you do the big unattended automations on the backbone with your core RPA team. This is about letting the entire company get in and get involved in changing the way that your company does business. So to answer your question directly, where I see this really succeed is where they rally across the organization to together change the way that their organization is doing business. Those are the ones that I really see it stick and I see it grow. One last thing, make sure that you balance between your quick wins and they're low value, but they're quick wins and they're across the board, with your projects that are big enough to make a meaningful impact to your ROI. So these things are done together is what I wanted to say.
Sure.
That makes a big sense.
So I completely agree with Chet, and what we call when we talk to some of our Accelerate clients, we talk about mission critical automations, right? So focusing on mission critical automations gives you that leverage, that investment into RPA kind of continues, and it gives you freedom to explore some low ROI but also very important initiatives, right? And then the second, but also important, is to build a culture of automation first mindset. So all organizations go through change, processes go through change, and as that change happens, having a automation first mindset, instead of saying that, hey, I'm going to just do these 10 steps manually until IT comes and delivers this report to me on a daily basis, you think about it and you say, well, I can download Studio X and do these 10 steps manually, and I now don't have to wait for IT to give me that report, right? So having that automation first mindset is very important, but from a top-down approach, so that if the business and the upper management sets these guidelines and sets these expectations, you will be able to embrace this as part of your culture more consistently.
That's a great point. Those C-suite guys, they need to be competing with each other in their monthly meetings as to which one of their departments has the most hours saved, the most dollars saved, the error rate decreased the most, accuracy rates increased the most. Whenever they gamify it at their level, it becomes electric across the organization.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I know it's 1:30. I do want to get to at least 2 questions, if that's okay, or at least a couple in here. So one of them is, what is the timeline average from initial start? So this is when you're really initially starting your AREP program to seeing some sort of value or value realization.
You want me to go, or you want that one, Harsh?
You could go ahead, Chet. I'd
Okay.
love to hear what you do.
So understand that your COE is already set up. You're already an established program, and you are now tackling AREP. You will see the first automations roll in within the first couple of weeks. You will start to see meaningful and much bigger automations roll into your COE within the first quarter. Understand, this is not a long-tailed thing. Once they've been through the online training, they've sat in the classroom for a day or two internally, you've done a hackathon, they're ready to go. And they're already thinking about, if I automate this, then I don't have to do that anymore. Oh, and I really hate doing this, so I'm going to definitely automate that thing. And what you see is it is the person to their right and to their left that may not be participating there. Well, hey, how are you done so fast? Well, what made you get done so quick? So the short answer is, you'll see your first citizen-built automations within the first couple of weeks, but you should have some meaningful value within the first quarter of rolling this out. That is, if they've done their training and they've done their hackathon stuff up front, so they're familiar with the tool. If it's from a dead cold start, give them that first 3 or 4 weeks to go through the training and to work with your internal team so that they know how to do it. And then once they know how to do it, they'll almost immediately start cranking out micro tasks and smaller automations, and that grows as time goes by.
Great. Thank you, Chet, for that. Well, thank you both for your time today. I apologize we couldn't get to more questions, but I'm gonna, if anybody has any that are remaining that we just didn't get to, please reach out to us, whether that be Harsh or myself or to Chet. We'd love to speak on this topic. Thank you, gentlemen, both, for your time today. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who joined.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. Thanks, Chet. Nice talking to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.